Poetic devices are a way to enhance the depth and impact of a poem. And as students of English literature, you need to know what they are and how they are used. In this video, we will look at 3 important poetic devices and how they can enrich the meaning of a poem. The first poetic device is a metaphor. Now, a metaphor is a figure of speech that compares two contrasting or unrelated things to create a deeper meaning. Let's take a very simple example. This is Emily Dickinson's line, "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul." Now, over here, Emily Dickinson has taken a very abstract concept called hope, and she has compared it to a thing with feathers, essentially a bird. Now, all of us know that birds have wings and they are able to fly very high up in the sky. They're able to spread their wings and fly away. And Emily Dickinson has used this beautiful metaphor to tell us that just like a bird is light and it can move about freely, hope also has the exact same effect on us when we keep it within our soul. Of course, metaphors are not always found only in poems. We also find them in drama. Here is an example from William Shakespeare's play, As You Like It. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. If you think about it, there is a double metaphor over here. The first metaphor is when he compares the world to a stage. The world that we live in, the world that 8 billion of us live in, is compared to a small little stage in a theatre. And just like all the actors on the stage have a role to play, all of us living in this world also similarly play different roles. Let's say there is a mother. Now, she plays the role of a mother as far as her kids are concerned, but she is also a wife. She has to play the role of a wife where her husband is concerned. She is a daughter, so she has to play the role of a daughter where her parents are concerned. What if she's working in an office? Then she has to play the role of maybe an office administrator or an HR personnel, or she has to play the role of a boss at her workplace. So there is one person, this woman, and yet she plays so many multiple roles. Exactly in the same way, Shakespeare says that all the men and women are merely players on this stage. Here's the second metaphor in this line. You might know that most plays have 3 acts. There's Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Our lives also play out in acts. We have the first act, which is childhood, the second act, which is adulthood, and the third act, which is our old age. Different people come into our lives and they occupy different roles throughout these 3 acts of our life, just like a play. In a play, you have the lead actors who are probably introduced in the very first act and they stay with you throughout the 3 acts. Our parents are like that. They come into our lives at the start of our life and they are with us throughout. On the other hand, there are some friends, let's say childhood friends or college friends. We know them for a certain number of years. Some of them we stay in touch with, others we lose touch with. So they are only actors in our play, in the play that we call life, for a limited amount of time. And then there are so many acquaintances that we meet along the way. All of them play small roles, bit roles, major roles, and before you know it, they've gone out of your life, just like the bit actors in a play. So this line, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players, is loaded with metaphors and you can come up with so many different interpretations. That's the beauty of a poetic device. The second poetic device is imagery. Now, imagery refers to the use of very vivid and descriptive language that appeals to the reader's senses. All of us have senses of sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. Poets use imagery to evoke emotions, create mental pictures, and this makes their verses much more evocative and engaging. What do I mean by imagery? What do I mean by sensory details? Let me give you an example. I went and watched this film called Oppenheimer the other day, and my friend asked me, what did you think of the movie? Now, there are 2 ways I could have told him what I thought of the film. Here's example number 1. Oh, it's about a man who wants to fight the Nazis. So he invents this nuclear weapon called an atomic bomb. He explodes the bomb, a lot of people are killed, there's a lot of death and destruction. And then at the end of it, he feels really sorry about it. And then the movie talks about all the trials and tribulations he went through and how he finally came through at the end. Now compare this to another description of the movie. The movie was so amazing. It really got into the mind of the person, and there were so many scenes which showed how this man actually came up with the idea of an atomic weapon. Sometimes the ground beneath your feet would just shake because the filmmaker tried to show what is going on in his mind. How is he imagining the atom getting split and the neurons, dividing the nucleus, and all that physics, of course, which I don't understand. But when the bomb went off, my God, it just, your heart just stopped. You were at the edge of your seat. The ground beneath my feet was shaking, and the sound was just so amazing. The sound design, it made you feel as if you were actually there when the bomb went off. It's a brilliant movie. Now, which of these two descriptions of the movie do you think your friend is going to find memorable and thought-provoking? Obviously the second one, because I employed so much imagery. I really took my film experience and I tried to communicate it to my friend in such a way that, even if he hasn't seen the film, he can almost visualize it. He knows exactly what experience I went through. That is exactly what this poetic device called imagery seeks to do when a person is reading a poem. Let's take a couple of very quick examples and see how poets have used imagery in their poems to bring about these kinds of effects on the reader. The very first line, I think, most of you would probably know this one. It's by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Look at the imagery. I who is made of flesh and bone, I'm wandering lonely as a cloud. What is a cloud? It's this thing floating in the sky that you can't even touch. You try to touch a cloud, you try to grab hold of a cloud, it'll just slip away. Without any purpose, it's lonely, it's away from the world. What happens then? When all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Immediately, me, the poet who's floating around like a cloud, my attention is drawn suddenly to a field of golden daffodils. William Wordsworth has, really evoked that picture so vividly. And what he's trying to convey is the beauty and the bounty of nature. You don't need to feel lonely. You don't need to feel as if you're alone in the world, just wandering aimlessly like a cloud. Whenever you feel this way, just go out into nature. Just go out into a field. Look at the flowers, look at the trees, look at the brook, look at the lake, look at the sky, look at the grass growing on the ground. All these things will earth you, they will center you into existence. You are part of a much bigger world and you will no longer feel lonely. So what has William Wordsworth done? He has evoked a lot of imagery, he has used a lot of sensory details to talk about how you don't need to feel lonely in this big wide world. All you need is a field of daffodils. You look at these beautiful flowers and you know that you are one with nature. You are one of nature. Let's look at another example. This one is from Lord Byron. Here again, there's a lot of imagery about skies and clouds, but you'll notice the difference. It's exactly the opposite of what William Wordsworth had done. She walks in beauty like a night of cloudless climes and starry skies. He's talking about a woman's beauty. She walks in beauty. She is so fragile, she is so unattainable, she is so delightful. She personifies beauty itself. What kind of beauty? Like a night of cloudless climes and starry skies. It's a clear sky, it's a clear night sky. You can't see anything except the twinkling stars at night. And just like the twinkling stars are at a distance and you can't really touch them, this woman that he is describing is also ethereal. It's like you try to touch her, you try to make contact with her, and she will just disappear. It's a very delicate, fragile, elegant kind of a beauty. Look at the imagery. The minute you read a line like this, you can visualize the woman in front of your eyes, you can see the starry skies, and you're just mesmerized, isn't it? Now, the third poetic device is rhyme. Rhyme is the repetition of identical or similar sounds, usually at the end of lines, which creates a pattern in the poem. There are many different kinds of rhyme. Like, for example, there is the perfect rhyme, cat, hat, exactly perfectly sounding words. You also have a slant rhyme, for example, love and move. They look similar on page, but they sound different. And then you have something called an internal rhyme. Let's take an example. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary. An internal rhyme is a rhyme that involves a word in the middle of a line and there's another word at the end of the line, and both these words seem to rhyme. They do rhyme. So a rhyming structure adds a musical quality to poem, which makes it much more enjoyable to read aloud or even to hear. It also provides you with a very good sense of the rhythm of a poem or the structure of a poem, because it tells you exactly where you are supposed to pause. You are supposed to pause at, let's say, the end of a line, continue the line, and then make it rhyme again. So this contributes to the overall flow and the coherence of the poem. So rhyme can, in a sense, serve as a unifying element which emphasizes the key points or themes in the poem. Additionally, when a poet uses rhyme strategically, and a lot of poets are extremely good at doing this, rhyme can reinforce the emotional impact of the poem by creating a sense of musicality and harmony in the poem. You don't need background music, you don't need a singer. Just listen to a poem, listen to the rhyming structure, and you will get a sense of the musicality or the harmony, or in some cases even the discordance in the poem. And that is always the poet's intention. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of how rhyme can really create a great poem. Here's a poem by William Blake called Tyger, Tyger. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Now, there are two types of rhyming structures that William Blake has used. The first one is obviously a perfect rhyme. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night. Bright and night. It's a perfect rhyme because they sound exactly the same. But the second rhyming structure or scheme is slightly different. It is a slant rhyme, and let me explain why. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Now, you need to be very careful over here, because it's very tempting to say that this is an internal rhyme. Because if you listen to it carefully, the words I and thy are rhyming. But those are not the words that are supposed to rhyme. The words that are rhyming here are I and symmetry. And if you think about it, if you listen to the words, they don't sound similar. They don't sound like rhyming words. But if you look at the spelling of symmetry, the last three letters are T-R-Y, try. I and try, they rhyme. But because T-R-Y comes at the end of a word, symmetry, you realize that it is not a perfect rhyme, but rather a slant rhyme. I and symmetry or symmetry. So William Blake, again, a master at using rhyming structure. And look at this, how beautifully he has used two different rhyming structures within the same poem. At the same time, it is such an evocative poem because he's talking about the awe-inspiring nature of the tiger. The tiger is in the forest of the night, which is supposed to be very dark. But he is so awe-inspiring that he is burning bright. So the entire forest is lit up because the tiger is there. Many poetic devices being used, rhyme just being one of them, but it gives you an idea of how to read the poem, where to take a pause, and look at the imagery that it conjures up. So imagery, rhyme, they all at the end go hand in hand. They are different parts of the same poem, but as a whole, they really add to the experience of reading a poem. Now let's look at another example. This one is from William Shakespeare's sonnet number 18. Now all of us know the Shakespearean sonnet rhyme structure. It's A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. What this means is the first line and the third line rhyme, the second line and the fourth line rhyme, and so on. And right at the end, G, G, which means the last two lines rhyme. Let's look at 4 lines of this sonnet. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Because this is a Shakespearean sonnet, we know the rhyming structure is A, B, A, B. So we need to look at the first line and the third line. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Day and May, it's a perfect rhyme. The first line and the third line. And the second line and the fourth line are also rhyming, and it's a perfect rhyme. Thou art more lovely and more temperate, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Temperate and date. And that's a very, very common rhyming structure in Shakespeare's sonnets. Of course, these are not the only poetic devices that poets use. You have simile, alliteration, symbolism, so many more poetic devices that all these poets and drama writers have been using for centuries to try and evoke a reaction in the person who is reading the poem or to whom the poem is being read out. As a student of English literature, you absolutely must master the different poetic devices that are being used. It is a part of your syllabus, but more than that, it will really help you appreciate and understand the poem at a whole new level.